I stood in the airport terminal with nothing but a backpack and a one-way ticket to Lisbon. 50 years old, divorced, kids grown and gone, career reduced to a corporate title that meant absolutely nothing when I looked in the mirror. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in decades. Possibility. The flight attendant smiled at me as I boarded, and I wondered if she could see it, the desperation mixed with hope that must have been written all over my face. I'd sold almost everything. The house in the suburbs, the sedan I'd driven for 8 years, the golf clubs I'd used maybe twice. My ex-wife thought I'd lost my mind. My son called a midlife crisis. But sitting in that window seat, watching the ground fall away beneath me, I knew it was something else entirely. It was the first honest decision I'd made in 30 years. Lisbon hit me like a wave. The light was different there, golden and forgiving, spilling across the terracotta rooftops and narrow cobblestone streets. I rented a tiny apartment in Alfama, the old neighborhood where laundry hung between buildings like colorful flags of surrender. The place was barely big enough for a bed and a table, but it had a window that overlooked the Tagus River, and every morning I'd wake up to church bells instead of alarm clocks. The first week I was lost, not just in the maze of streets, but in myself. I'd spent so long being someone's husband, someone's father, someone's employee, that I'd forgotten how to just be. I'd walk for hours with no destination, stopping at cafes where I couldn't read the menu, ordering by pointing and hoping for the best. The locals must have thought I was insane, this middle-aged American stumbling through their neighborhood with tears in his eyes over a perfect pastel de nata. Then I met Antonio. He was 73, sitting on the same bench I'd claimed as my own, overlooking the river at sunset. He didn't speak much English, and my Portuguese was non-existent, but somehow we understood each other. He'd lost his wife 2 years before. I lost myself somewhere along the way. Every evening, we'd sit together, sharing a bottle of wine and the comfortable silence that only comes from two people who survive their own storms. One night, Antonio brought his guitar. He played fado, that haunting Portuguese music that sounds like longing itself has found a voice. I don't know what the words meant, but I felt them in my chest, in that hollow place where my old life used to be. When he finished, he looked at me with knowing eyes and said in broken English, "You running from something or running to something?" I didn't have an answer then. Weeks turned into months. I started teaching English at a small language school. The money was nothing compared to my old salary, but I'd never felt richer. My students ranged from teenagers to grandmothers, all of them teaching me as much as I taught them. Maria, a baker in her 60s, would bring fresh bread to class and tell stories about her childhood in the countryside. João, a young father, would show me photos of his daughter and remind me to call my own kids more often. I stopped checking my old work email. I stopped comparing my life to the highlight reels on social media. I started swimming in the Atlantic, the cold water shocking me alive every morning. I learned to cook bacalhau a dozen different ways. I fell in love with a city, with a language, with a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. 6 months in, my son visited. He barely recognized me. I'd lost weight, grown a beard, developed lines around my eyes from squinting into the sun while laughing. We sat on Antonio's bench, and I watched my son's face as the sunset painted the river gold. "Dad," he said quietly, "I get it now. I finally get it." He didn't mean the trip. He meant life. He meant the courage it takes to start over. He meant the grace required to forgive yourself for all the years you spent sleepwalking. I never bought a return ticket. This one-way journey taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you needed to find what you actually want. At 50, I didn't find myself in Lisbon. I created myself there, piece by piece, sunset by sunset, conversation by conversation. The man I was is gone, and I don't mourn him, because the man I've become finally knows how to live.